debates and panels. So I am your host, Brittany. This is my co-host, Todd. How are you?
Doing great, Britt. How are you tonight?
Good. And we have Justin, who started the show with us. He is back as more of our left-wing host. So since I've gotten my left-wing card revoked, so he's going to stand in for
Hopefully
that.
I don't lose mine.
All right, so yeah, we are going to be having a debate panel tonight. It's going to be on transgender issues and whether or not it's a mental illness. So let's bring on our guests. All right, let's start off with Mouthy Infidel. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing okay.
So yeah, you want to introduce yourself, tell people where you lie on the political spectrum and where people can find you.
Yeah, I'm Mouthy Infidel. I think I'm pretty far to the left, at least relative to most people in the US. I have a YouTube channel called Mouthy Infidel, a Twitter account called Mouthy Infidel. I do debates and other kinds of political content. So yeah, I've talked with Lauren Southern in the past about these issues. I thought it was a nice conversation, so I'm looking forward to discussing these issues again.
All right, great. Next up, let's bring on Avi. How are you?
How you doing?
Same questions.
For those who don't know, I'm Avi. I'm a doctor, and I debate as a hobby. I've debated here before on vaccines last time, so it's good to be back. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to having this discussion.
All right, thank you. Next up, let's bring on Lauren Witzke. How are you tonight?
Hi. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so if you want to introduce yourself, tell people where you lie on the political spectrum and where people can find you.
Right. So my name is Lauren Witzke. I'm the former Republican nominee from Delaware for U.S. Senate. It was my first time ever running for office. I got involved in politics in 2018. On the political spectrum, I am a strong Christian conservative. I'm really passionate about social issues and social conservatism, especially the issue of the restoration of the American nuclear family. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk to other people about transgenderism and the classification as mental illness, as well as its effects on the breakdown of the nuclear family. So thank you for having me.
All right, thank you. And last up, let's bring on Lauren Southern. How are you tonight?
Hello, good to be here. I apologize. I'm on 2 hours of sleep, so forgive the yawns. I'm not bored. Excited to be here. I do political content on Twitch and YouTube. And yeah, Mouthy and I have had a really good conversation about transgenderism before. Enjoyed that. I believe Avi and I have discussed this before. Lauren, nice to meet you for the first time. Great name. I like it. And yeah.
All right, so here's what we'll do. Each person can have like 1 to 5 minutes if you guys want to just give your stance on this topic. After that, we will just open up the floor for open discussion. For those watching, if you have any questions, tag politically provoked so we know you're talking to us and not chat, and we will be jotting them down throughout the debate and get to them at the Q&A. After the Q&A, we'll do closing statements and final thoughts. So I guess, Avi, why don't you get us going?
Sure. So I'll be debating in the con position. So my conclusion is it is not the case that transgenderism is a mental illness. Here is the syllogism that I'm posting in the chat. I'll read that loud. Premise 1, if transgenderism is a mental illness, then it's not logically possible for a transgender person to not have a mental illness. That takes the form of P and complies not Q. Premise 2, it's logically possible for a transgender person to not have a mental illness. That's affirming Q. Conclusion, it is not the case that transgenderism is a mental illness, therefore not P. So this is, in logic, it takes the form of the modus tollens argument. P implies not Q, Q, therefore not P. It's a deductively valid argument. To reject the conclusion, they will need to reject either premise 1 or premise 2. And they would have to show how premise 1 would be false. That would be very hard because it's an analytically entailed premise. If they want to try to reject premise 2, then they would need to show what contradiction is entailed by a transgender person not having a mental illness. Things that won't work, rambling on about what it means to have a mental illness, that won't work unless you can show it's directly relevant to premise 2. Other things that won't work, if you want to adopt proprietary definitions, if that's the strategy, that may work, but then the question will just be re-asked with respect to how the definitions are standardly used. So step 1, show which premise is false. If you want to say premise 1 is false, good luck. That's analytically entailed. If you want to say premise 2 is false, show the contradiction. And hopefully the argument will be engaged with. All right, let's have fun.
Okay. All right, Mouthy, you go next.
Yeah, I guess there's not much to say. I agree with pretty much everything Avi said, which is just to say that if you want to prove that transgenderism is a mental illness, you actually have to show that it's not logically possible for there to be a person who is transgender and doesn't have a mental illness. So you're going to have to derive some sort of a contradiction in there being a trans person who does not have a mental illness. Obviously, I don't think it can be done, but I'm interested to hear how one would argue for that. So,
All right, I guess we can do Witzke.
Okay. So I'm reading this and it just seems like a decorated word salad. Even clinical psychiatric studies say that gender dysphoria is a mental health issue. I look at the end result. So with transgenders, the whole community, the demographic, they struggle with a 40% attempted suicide rate. Am I correct or am I wrong? Or is there something funny? No, this isn't funny actually, because 40% of people that end up transitioning or participating in the lifestyle of transgenderism do attempt suicide. The other 60% who do survive suicide rates suffer with suicidal ideation. They struggle with substance abuse. Many of them are victims of traumatic sexual childhood abuse. You wouldn't believe, I actually ran a rehab center, a drug substance abuse rehab center, and you would not believe how many transgenders ended up with me. Now, it's not just, a lifestyle that they chose. This is years and years of trauma. And what we have been doing is we've been enabling a lifestyle that ends up in a 40% suicide rate. How can you enable that kind of lifestyle, especially as a doctor, somebody who claims that they're supposed to save lives? You're watching this destroy people's lives and you say nothing. Instead, you empower and you enable a lifestyle where people are depressed, people are broken, people end up trying to kill themselves or molesting other people to, a lot of them do molest children. 40% of the LGBTQ community, they make up 40% of the pedophilia in the United States of America, despite making up 3% of the population. Now, these are statistics. Statistically speaking, I believe that you guys should be proving to me that it's not a mental illness, because it is.
All right, Southern.
Well, I mean, I suppose the debate is already over with Avi's big calculation here. So I guess I'll just have to agree with that. And because transgenderism isn't a mental illness and there's nothing wrong with transgender people, there should be absolutely no paid for insurance company surgeries. In fact, I don't think they need treatment at all. We probably shouldn't have to use their pronouns, since there's no risk of exacerbating their gender dysphoria because they've got nothing wrong with them. I don't think there should be any paid state for treatment. I don't think we need clinics for them. None of that. Because there's absolutely nothing wrong with these people. No mental illness.
So I'll respond to Lauren Witzke and then Lauren Suss. So in terms of Lauren Witzke, just didn't engage with the argument at all, didn't show which premise was false. Went on a ramble about increased risks, which there are, but again, that doesn't engage with the argument. You can have increased risks without inherently being a mental illness. As to Lauren Southern's point, as again, there's a distinction between something being a mental illness and something resulting in risks or mental illness. Certain medications.
Is gender dysphoria classified as a mental health issue? Is it?
It is, but that's not what we're talking about.
Exactly.
That's not what we're talking about.
Mental health
we're
issue.
talking about We're talking about transgenderism.
Same thing. It's the same thing.
Well, now you'd have to show that you'd have to. Well, now the argument just gets kicked back, and you'd have to show that there's a logical contradiction in there being a trans person who doesn't have the condition of gender dysphoria, right?
Well, Mouthy, wait a second. Before because Witzke's clearly not tracking here. I just want to respond to Lauren Southern here because
sure.
So we can grant, it's compatible. You can have a higher rate of mental illnesses. Having a higher rate of mental illnesses that do need treatment is compatible with something not being a mental illness. X can lead to a higher risk of mental illnesses. That doesn't entail that X is in itself a mental illness. What we're debating here is whether transgenderism is a mental illness. We can grant that transgenderism does lead to higher risks of things like gender dysphoria.
So should I only have to use someone's, like, because the argument for pronouns typically is if you don't use them, then you are exacerbating someone's gender dysphoria, right? So if pronouns are just a personal preference thing, does that argument then fall apart?
So it doesn't. However, that topic is
involved here. Because I feel like, can I just explain what I feel like the mental illness aspect of transgenderism is often used constantly in arguments to say you have to do X, Y, Z, otherwise you're going to cause suicides, you're going to cause mental illness exacerbation, we need to have transgender surgery, we need to promote that, we need to pay for this, otherwise you're going to exacerbate these people's mental health issues. And then when the topic comes up about whether transgender people are mentally ill, everyone's like, how dare you say that? And we're all sitting here like, you've just been telling us that if we approach this from any approach other than a left-wing progressive one, that we are literally murdering children or murdering people because their mental health is so bad. But then suddenly when we actually want to agree with you and call it mental illness, we're fucking idiots.
No, because so no one called you an idiot, Lauren. So real quick. So again, having a high rate of mental illness, and someone could still make the pronoun argument. That's not the argument I make, by the way. It's a different topic than what we came to discuss, which I'm happy to do so, by the way. Someone can make that argument saying, okay, well, there's a high rate of mental illness in this population, while it being compatible with that condition, not in and of itself being a mental illness. So someone can just as easily make the same pronoun argument while maintaining that transgenderism is not a mental illness. They can just say, well, it leads or it's associated with a high rate of mental illness, even though it is not a mental illness. And they can make the same pronoun argument saying, okay, well, because that's the case, and because it just so happens to be that these individuals do have high rates of suicide and that can increase the rate, they can make the same pronoun argument. There's no entailment.
Okay, so let me ask you, is gender transitioning, like therapy, whether it be hormone therapy or surgery, is that a medical or a cosmetic procedure?
That is, it can be, well, technically it could be either one. So generally it is a medical procedure for people who have gender dysphoria. And it has been shown to reduce the risks of suicide in the best data. Your own expert would agree with that. Who I just spoke to today, by the way. Now, if the idea is to say, well, if it's not a mental illness, then why are we giving them surgeries? Well, again, the reason we're giving these people surgeries by covering them is not because they're transgender per se. The reason we give them these surgeries is because they have gender dysphoria. They have something that is a mental illness.
Do you think gender dysphoria is a mental illness?
Yes.
Okay,
it
well,
is.
All right.
It's classified as a
Most
Dsm-5.
people who are transgender have dysphoria.
There's absolutely no difference.
Wait.
Bye.
Wait, that's well.
Go.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait.
There's no difference. There is absolutely no difference.
There's
somebody that feels like they were born in the wrong body.
Well, wait a minute. Yes, there is. Yes, well, there absolutely is.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and explain.
Sure. So the definition of transgenderism is the condition of someone feeling that they are not the same gender as they are the sex, or as the one they were assigned or said to have at birth. That's completely different from gender dysphoria, which is a condition that causes mental anguish or causes harm to someone's psyche, such that there's a disconnect between their mind and their body, such that they can't do certain things. They have impaired social function. They have impaired ability to, they start getting depression things. That's a completely different thing than just being transgender per se. Not everyone who has transgender dysphoria. And if you think it's not different, if any of you, Lauren Southern or Lauren Witzke, think it's not different, then what's the contradiction between someone for someone entailed by someone being transgender without having gender dysphoria?
What percentage of transgender individuals have dysphoria? Is there any research on that?
It's tangential to the debate proposition. Like whether it's 99% or 1%, it would still be the case that transgenderism is still different.
People in my chat have got this right. This is just like a silly semantic debate.
Mm-hmm.
People who have gender dysphoria, which is going to be a large portion of people with transgenderism because they feel they are in the wrong body, have a mental illness. And maybe, sure, there's this like 1% of people that feel perfectly fine with their body, but think that they're the other gender or whatever. I'm willing to accept that fine, but it doesn't get rid of the broader point that gender dysphoria, which is one of the main aspects of transgenderism, a very large part of it, which is why so many people want hormone treatment, which is why there is this massive movement for surgery for kids to get hormone blockers, is because gender dysphoria is one of the main aspects of the transgender community right now, and one of the main aspects of having transgenderism.
Well, just
so dismissing it, one second, dismissing it as a semantic argument is not going to work, because again, that's the debate proposition. You can if I wish if only that move would work, where to call something a semantic dispute when it actually means something else, to substitute it in with an argument saying, well, because this is correlated to that. It doesn't matter if it's 99 or 99.9%. I don't think it is
actually,
that high, by the way.
Define gender dysphoria.
Okay, so gender dysphoria is defined by the Dsm-5, and I'll pull that up for you right now. No problem. Okay, give me 1 second.
Is the state of transgenderism not feeling like your body does not match?
No, but there's an additional criteria. It's not just that. Okay,
right,
so gender dysphoria in adolescents and adults. Yeah, sure. So, so it's a so it has the following criteria. So it has a marked incongruence between one's experience or expressed gender and assigned gender of at least 6 months duration, as manifestly by at least 2 of the following. A marked incongruence between one's experience. I'm just making sure this is from the Dsm-5. Give me 1 second. The point is, and I'll read it out.
No, read it all.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
What's the second one?
So
the first one is a marked incongruence.
Yeah. And the second one is a strong desire to be rid of one's primary or secondary sex characteristics because of a marked incongruence with one experience.
So that's being transgender.
And then
so the DSM-5
a strong,
has being
it's not, that's not,
if you being transgender is having an incongruence with your mind.
If you wouldn't interrupt me for a second, it's not the only criteria there. Let me finish. If you told me to read out the whole thing, I was going to read you the relevant part, but you wanted me to read the whole thing. And if I'm going to do that, don't interrupt me. Number 3, a strong desire for the primary and or secondary sex characteristics of the other gender. Number 4, a strong desire to be of the other gender. Number 5, a strong desire to be treated as the other gender. Number 6, a conviction that one has the typical feelings and reactions of the other gender. And B, the B criteria, the condition is associated, this is a necessary criteria, condition is associated with clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. If you don't have that criteria, then it doesn't matter if you have all of the 6A criteria. You do not have gender dysphoria, even if you are transgender. That's how it's defined in the
DSM-5. Is what you're saying? Well, we are looking at, I believe it's a 60% depression rate, 40% suicide rate.
Well,
if that isn't distress, I'm not really sure what is there, Doc.
I mean, we can say that there's a large number of trans people who have dysphoria and have certain negative mental outcomes, while still saying that there's no logical contradiction in someone being transgender and not having those mental outcomes.
So what you're basically saying is there's this potential small percentage of people that feel like they are in the wrong body. They feel like they are mentally a woman or a man, but in the sex characteristics of the other gender or sex, man. Got to keep up with the progressive terminology here. And those small percent are entirely unbothered, or not unbothered to a degree that would be emotionally distressing whatsoever to them, and therefore they don't fit into the DSM-5 version of a mental illness. That's what you're suggesting.
What I am saying is that transgenderism and gender dysphoria are 2 different things, and transgenderism is not a mental illness. Gender dysphoria is. And the specific criteria that differentiates gender dysphoria is the B criteria as outlined in the DSM-5, which is the condition is associated with clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of functioning. Now, given that, it is not the case that transgenderism is a mental illness. Now, I'm going to redirect this to the argument because I went along answering 21 questions with the 2 Laurens here for quite some time. Now Lauren Southern has conceded the debate proposition from the outset.
Well, no,
seemingly a little sarcastically, but I'll just confirm that it has.
Question about whether transgenderism and gender dysphoria are inherently connected. No, because now we have to answer the question of
we've answered
inherently connected.
Yeah, we've answered that.
No, I
we've
don't
answered that.
feel
The
it
difference.
has
The
been
difference.
answered.
Well,
'Cause
by
that's-
definition,
now
it's
we have to
okay.
ask
Well,
the
the difference.
question.
Well, here's the answer. Yeah, here's the answer. The difference between transgenderism and gender dysphoria is the B criteria in the DSM-5 that's necessary in order to have gender dysphoria, which is the condition is associated with clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of functioning. You do not need to have that in order to be transgender. That's the difference. The difference is one requires this, one does not require this. Now, what's the contradiction?
So within the DSM-5, it suggests that.
How
I'm
it's
not
standard, how
going to
mental
deny
illness
what
is
the
standardly.
DSM-5 says, for sure.
Yeah, that's how it's standardly used in the medical. That's how mental illness is standardly defined in the medical community. You agree with that?
I mean, well, let me check the definition of how they identify something like schizophrenia, which also includes people thinking they are, in positions where they are not, seeing things that are not congruent with necessarily the reality they're living in.
What's the relevance?
Because if this could simply be, I could potentially disagree with the DSM-5 definition. I'm not going to for now, but is the definition of mental illness by the DSM-5, you have to find something distressing that is not congruent with reality, right? Or is it just it has to be not congruent with reality? And are they consistent?
Wait, that's a different question, Lauren. That's a different question. You're jumping to a different question now. You asked me what the difference, I didn't say it was how it defined mental illness. I said, I gave you the difference between transgenderism and gender dysphoria. There are other mental illnesses that don't need to have that can have other things. Like, so you can be a schizophrenic who has delusions and has false beliefs and has disorganized speech. So the criteria, the DSM-5 criteria is going to be two of the following for a significant portion of time during 1 month period: 1, delusions; 2, hallucinations; 3, disorganized speech, frequent derailment or incoherence; 4, grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior; and 5, negative symptoms, which would be things like diminished emotional expression. But so I'm not saying that that's the only way you can have a mental illness is to be gender dysphoria. All I'm pointing out to you is that gender dysphoria and transgenderism are accepted to be different things by the standard usage in the medical community.
And what I'm kind of suggesting is, if the DSM-5 says that, and we're just going to be like, well, we all have to just appeal to what the DSM-5 says, then what are Lauren and I sitting here supposed to do? Well, I guess that's what the DSM-5 says, right?
Well, no, you could make an argument. No, you could make an argument. No, you can make an argument that given what this condition is, given what transgenderism is, it's entailed that there would be some sort of mental illness. So you can say, if someone has a gender that is not the same as their sex, then it follows that they will have either delusions or hallucinations or paranoid delusional disorder, for example. There's ways of making that argument. I don't think they work. I think they hilariously fail. But what I'm not doing here is I'm not saying the DSM defines transgenderism as not a mental illness. That's not what I'm doing. Again, I'm going to bring it back to the argument now. Now that we cleared up that transgenderism and gender dysphoria are not the same thing, I'm going to bring it back to the argument and ask what premise do either of you reject? Premise 1 or premise 2? It's a simple argument.
Sure. Like gender, I think 99.9% of transgender people probably have dysphoria. And therefore, I don't think it's a ridiculous statement when people say transgenderism and mental illness are highly correlated. When someone says transgenderism is a mental illness, they usually do mean dysphoria. I understand the semantic claim you're making that technically transgenderism and gender dysphoria have two different definitions. I understand that. But when most people talk about it, they're like, yes, you feel in your mind that the gender you are differs from your body. It tends to distress you. As Lauren just highlighted, the suicide rates are extremely high. Depression rates are really high. And so when people say transgenderism is a mental illness, the only disagreement there really would be that slight semantic separation from gender dysphoria, which tends to afflict the majority of transgender people. And perhaps this unicorn transgender person who is not bothered whatsoever, feels they need no surgery, feels they don't need to change their appearance at all because they're not distressed by anything that's going on in their head, or they're not distressed to a significant enough level. Like that, I could maybe that exists, fine.
So a couple things. So again, calling it a semantic, again, calling it a semantic difference doesn't change the fact that this is a debate proposition, and
Okay,
again,
sure,
we're not
but you
going to
won the
debate
debate.
whether
I don't
gender
care.
dysphoria is a mental illness. That's the debate. Okay,
There
great.
Wait,
you
so
go.
just
Congrats.
to clarify,
so just to be clear, then, Lauren, just to be clear, so you agree with me then that it is not the case that transgenderism is a mental illness.
Bro, sure, I don't care. Gender dysphoria is a mental illness, and like 99% of transgender people have it.
Can you just give me the
fine.
citation for 99? Wait, I'm actually, so now I am.
The vast majority of people. All right. I have no citation. I just have never met a person who is transgender that feels no need, that doesn't feel bothered by the fact to a significant degree that their mind doesn't match their body. And I don't know, maybe
so bothered to a significant degree is not the same thing as the condition associated with clinically significant distress or impairment of social. Well, look, I'm just saying that
I should have kept with my initial premise. There is no mental illness, none at all, zero.
That's not what I. Okay, so when you say it like that,
transgenderism is not a mental illness at all. There's nothing.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Now
there's
it's
no correlation.
Now
when people make that assertion,
that's not what
they
we
are
said.
just
That's
completely.
Not, Lauren, don't stop. That's not. We're not saying there's no association. We're granting. We agree with that. There's a clear correlation with mental illness.
Okay.
100%.
Then we agree.
Okay.
So when people say,
so we don't have a. Yeah.
All right. So transgenderism is highly correlated with mental illness. Does that fly with you?
Yes, it does fly with me. The only thing I'm defending here is that transgenderism is not a mental. Now look, maybe it's 10%. I know that 80, the last time I asked a sociologist this, 80% of transgender people didn't end up getting surgery. Now maybe that's because they had a lack of access, but I know there are quite a few. I do know quite a few transgender people who don't have dysphoria, who have not gotten surgery. So I don't know the percentages on it, but regardless, it seems like Lauren Southern agrees on this debate proposition. That just leaves Lauren Witzke. So Lauren Witzke, do you agree as well with Lauren Southern that it's not the case that transgenderism is a mental illness, or do you disagree with Lauren Southern on that? Do we have agreement with you as well, or no?
No, actually, I'm still sitting here trying to allow you to convince me that it's not a mental illness, and single thing you've said has kind of reestablished what I was already thinking. As far as your first sentence, I'm not really sure what this is. Like, I don't know if you wrote this up beforehand. I don't know. But you said if transgenderism is a mental illness, then it's not logically possible for a transgender person to not have a mental illness. Well, as a doctor, you should know that people have coinciding conditions. People may struggle with gender dysphoria, transgenderism, but also substance abuse, depression. So that's not exclusive to just transgenderism. They can have multiple ailments, all triggered from childhood sexual abuse that triggered them into that lifestyle in the first place. So to be honest with you, I'm not convinced. I'm bored. And it's very interesting. I'm actually more so taken back to know that we have doctors like you, people who know that you're enabling a lifestyle that hurts people, that kills people, that ends up destroying lives. And you're still just defending it, and it's just shocking.
Wait, so if we want to talk about
no, keep her to the argument. What premise do you reject then?
Well, I mean, I believe it's a mental illness, and you have not convinced me otherwise, so.
Okay, well, what's the logical contradiction in there being a trans person who doesn't have a mental illness?
She didn't say what premise she rejects, Mouthy. Wait, just to be clear. So Lauren Southern agrees the argument is sound. So we're done with debating her then, right? We agree, Lauren. So the argument is sound on your view?
I honestly don't care. I think we need transgender people in all of our sports. I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with them.
Stop.
I didn't say you said that. I didn't say you said that. We're not even talking about transgender sports. That's genuinely my position as of late. I'm actually not trying to conflate your position. That's genuinely how I feel right now. I literally am at the point where I'm like, we need to just open it all up and let people just see how it goes, open the floodgates, have absolutely no inhibition.
That's fine. I actually don't. Okay, so that's regardless of what your views on that topic are, you agree with the argument I presented is sound or not?
you know what?
As in
I'm
the
not
premises
even
are true.
joking. Sure, it probably is. Like, I don't doubt that you've probably written a conclusion here that is accurate in your equation, much like how there have been physicists that have been able to write on the back of a napkin an equation that shows bees can't fly. Like, I'm sure you have written something that logically makes sense. But like, just in the real world, to me, when the majority of people with transgenderism have gender dysphoria, I don't think it's that crazy that people conflate that correlation. I think that, once again, this is just a like,
so this isn't answering the question.
I actually do not see the point of this debate. I don't. Like, sure, transgenderism is not a mental illness, whatever. I can accept that. That doesn't change the fact that the vast majority of transgender people have gender dysphoria, and therefore, when we talk about this issue, we talk about the mental illness.
That's fine. That's fine, Lauren. Okay, look, Lauren, and that's, by the way, that's what I wanted to talk with you about. Really, that's what I prefer to do instead of a semantic discussion like this. But I'm glad so just to be clear, we agree that it's not the case that transgenderism is a mental illness. The conclusion of this argument, you agree that that's true.
Sure, I don't even care.
Okay, cool. That's fine enough for me. Okay,
that doesn't matter to me.
Well,
okay,
then
so
it
you
looks
agree,
like it's three against. I guess it's 3 against 1 then, because I'm holding strong.
Okay,
I will not cave on
We'll get to
you.
You
cannot tell me.
We'll get to you. So just to be clear,
it doesn't matter.
Whether you care about it or not.
If you define it differently, it doesn't change the fact that the vast majority of transgender people have gender dysphoria, which is a mental illness. Like, it doesn't matter how you guys want to define all of this.
We're not defining. When you say define it differently, it's the implication is that we're using some sort of proprietary language here. I'm not using proprietary language in any of my terms. I'm just giving them to you how they're standardly used, either in the medical community. Transgenderism, I'm using the Cambridge Dictionary. And in terms of the reason I'm doing that, because transgenderism never appears in the DSM. Only transsexualism ever appeared in it historically. Transgenderism, I don't even believe it ever appeared in any version of the DSM. So I'm using a dictionary definition. I'm trying to do standardly used terminology here. So I'm not trying to.
So basically, you're essentially saying that it's not a mental illness because it hasn't been clinically diagnosed as a mental illness.
Yes, that's
what we're talking about. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Because it has not been documented as a mental illness. Because it's written on paper or not doesn't matter. It doesn't.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
You're not tracking.
I'm trying to say. In reality, we can see that amongst this community, like, there.
The reason I'm saying it's not a mental illness was given by an argument. That's the definitions that are used for the terms that appear in the argument. I'm just trying to point out that I'm not trying to pull any idiosyncratic definitions or proprietary terms. I'm trying the best that I can, and I've done a good job at doing so, at providing in terms as how they're standardly used. The reason I'm saying it's not a mental illness is because it's possible for a transgender person to not have any mental illness. And if it was the case that transgenderism was a mental illness, that would not be possible. So if you don't care about that, that's fine, Lauren Southern. We can agree on that and we can move on, hopefully, and talk about the actual mental illness and what to do about that. That's the conversation that I'd like to have with you, rather than a conversation like this. But this was the debate topic, and so it's just trivially the case that transgenderism is not a mental illness. You don't care about it, that's fine.
Here's something I would say. The reason I don't care about it too is I actually think mental illness doesn't have much weight in today's world and conversation. Like, I think it's lost a lot of definition. Even when, I have ADHD, right? And I've gotten therapy for my ADHD, and I've been like, oh yeah, I've got an inability to deal with these things. And even my therapist will be like, we call it neurodivergent. We don't call it a disorder, right? So even something that is literally labeled as a disorder is being changed to just being neurodivergent. And I think that a lot of these definitions are going to change over time. So what is mental illness? What isn't? Female hysteria used to be mental illness, right? That isn't anymore. So that's why I actually really only care about dealing with what we see in reality. And I think that's what Lauren is addressing here too.
Cool.
We can talk all day about your little dictionary definitions and what the DSM-5 says. I'll concede that. And there are probably a lot of doctors who do observe that and see that. But like, in reality, the majority of people who are transgenders struggle deeply with mental illness issues. And that's just why people tend to make that.
Yep, Lauren, I agree. I agree with you that the majority. I'll agree with you, even the majority. Although I have to look through the literature to see the exact percentage. But I'll agree with you that there's a strong correlation between people who are transgender and having mental illness. And the conversation that I really would have liked to have with you is what to do about that and the data involved in that. That's what I wanted. However, that's not what we're here today, as you've agreed, you've told me. We're here to debate whether transgenderism. Now you've conceded, you've already agreed with me. It's not the case that transgenderism is a mental illness, and you don't care about that. Now it's fine if you don't care about that, but that unfortunately is what the debate topic is. I regrettably, I'd love to have the more important conversation with you.
I do want to give Mouthy some time, Avi, because you're kind of being a little bit of a ball hog
here. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Now, Mouthy, one thing, just now, Lauren's out of the equation now, because Lauren Southern is, because she's conceded for this debate topic. It's just Lauren Witzke now. I would just keep her to the argument. Yeah, I would just, you'll lose. I would just keep her to the argument and which premise she rejects. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So which? Yeah. So I mean, I guess like which part of the argument do you not accept? So I guess, do you agree that if transgenderism is a mental illness, then that means that it's not logically possible for there to be a transgender person who doesn't have a mental illness?
Okay. So. All right, I'm going to reverse this back to what I understand, kind of. Okay, so I'm going to apply this to addiction, because addiction is what I know through and through. Now, I understand where Avi's coming from, where he is saying that transgenderism is a result of mental illness. You know, they say with addiction recovery, they have classified addiction as a mental illness, which I completely disagree with. I think it's a choice, it's a personal choice. Addiction is the result of mental illness or bad choices. So the end result's addiction. With transgenderism, the end result is transitioning, cutting your dick off, all these things, I see the end result. So I'm trying to understand if he is saying that transgenderism is a end result of a mental illness, or as opposed to being a mental illness itself. So I'm trying to understand.
So I'm saying that I can answer that. I'm saying that transgenderism is associated is even strongly associated with mental illnesses. However, transgenderism in and of itself is not a mental illness. Now, I just point out that you didn't address which premise was incorrect. So you're given an argument. You have two premises and a conclusion. It's a modus ponens argument. It's valid. So in order for it to not be sound, one of the premises needs to be false. Otherwise, the conclusion that it's not the case that transgenderism is a mental illness goes through. So which premise do you reject?
Well, I reject the premise that people have to be they can't have a mental illness and be transgender.
Well, I don't think that is a premise of the argument.
No, it says it right there. It's right there.
Well,
it's
we're not saying that
possible for a transgender person to not have a mental illness, because we see it. I'm not operating in delusions here.
The premise is if transgenderism is a mental illness, then it's not logically possible for a transgender person to not have a mental illness, right? We're just saying that as sort of as an analytic element,
and then the second premise, yeah.
And so the claim is just that
the point is that
sorry, my internet's getting out a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so
we had a little bit of a reload in this whole
the claim is just that if you're going to say that transgenderism is a mental illness, then you have to say that it's not logically possible for there to be a person who is trans and doesn't have a mental illness. We're not saying that a trans person can't have a mental illness. We're just saying that it would be entailed by your view that or it's a premise of the argument that if this is something that you want to say, you're going to have to show that it's not logically possible.
Okay. Well, he said that, Avi actually said earlier about how there was that sixth element that differentiates between gender dysphoria and transgenderism, and that's distress. It causes them distress. It causes them mental pain to a degree. And I really honestly haven't encountered a transgender person who wasn't in pain. You can't tell me that after they self-mutilate themselves, that they aren't in excruciating pain. So I don't understand how trying to create a different, you're trying to make them different, but they're the same. And one is classified as a mental illness and one is not, because it's not written down on paper. And that has been your argument. So, from where I stand, you know, it looks like a mental illness to me, and I don't operate in delusions. I'm not going to make excuses or try to twist things or throw some decorated words at the girls to try to confuse them. This is what I see. This is what I know. And I haven't been convinced any differently. So I'm going to stick with, I disagree with you. I absolutely 100% disagree, because people that do struggle with gender dysphoria and are distressed, people that suffer with transgenderism or wanting to transition, wanting to self-mutilate themselves, that is distress. And that is the part of gender dysphoria that makes it a mental illness. So let's operate in reality here. Let's try to operate in reality at least, and not participate in delusions. So, you know, I don't know what you're asking me. All I know is that, I mean, it looks like a mental illness to me. I haven't been convinced otherwise. And that's just what it is. You know, that is what it is.
So we've been through this already.
Can I just jump in here? Because
sure.
I want to just clarify, like, Lauren's making a very similar point to what I was trying to get across, which is pretty much the point is, like, I'm reading the Dsm-5 right now, and the definition of gender dysphoria just doesn't sound that different from the definition of transgenderism.
Yes, it is, and we can go through that again if you'd like. We can go over it.
No,
we really don't want
to.
But like well, Lauren was saying,
but if
maybe
you're going to make, if you go back on the no. The difference is very simple. Gender dysphoria in the DSM-5 requires the B criteria, which is the condition is associated with significant
stress. Yes, we understand that. It's
great.
What Lauren is saying is,
pointing out that it's similar is not the point.
What the other Lauren is saying, which is also something I've experienced. I've had a lot of transgender friends, believe it or not, which means I'm obviously not transphobic. Look at my trans friend, JK. But no, like, every transgender person I have ever met has dealt with significant distress. I've never met someone who hasn't. Lauren has said the same thing, and maybe we're just going off of our personal life experience. But when I watch media on this, when I watch debates on this, when I go out into the world and watch speeches at universities on this, one of the main topics that is always brought up is how much distress being transgender causes someone, particularly when they can't get treatment, when they can't get hormone blockers, when they can't present the way they want to. Like, this is what we say when we're like, the definitions actually don't sound that different of gender dysphoria and transgenderism, because in anyone who has eyes can see transgender people explaining how being transgender and not being congruent with how they feel their sex and gender is causes them distress. And I do think that if you are a human being, any human being, if you feel there is something so drastic as your entire body, your genitals, like the way your face is not congruent with how you want to look, how could that not cause you distress? Like, I don't see how it could not.
So
I don't see a situation in which there is a person who is transgender that doesn't feel distressed by the fact that
if all of that is true, it's compatible with transgenderism not being a mental illness. Because again, we keep going.
Distress was the main factor of the mental illness aspect.
No, because
that it causes
no. It can cause. Yes, because something can cause someone a mental illness, but that thing that causes it is not a mental illness.
Okay,
there are people who look. There. Wait, hold on. No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yes,
it's not
it is.
The same
because
it's not. The difference in the definition
naturally causes distress.
No,
then it, like,
wait. Not in because no. You're not tracking now. Now you're not tracking. Look, if there is an if A overlaps with B, no, you're really not. Look, if A overlaps with B, okay, and B and the fact that A overlaps with B doesn't make A and B the same thing. There is overlap in the definition of transgenderism, gender dysphoria. However, there is also a non-overlap. The non-overlap is a criteria that is not present in what is necessary to be transgender. And there are transgender people who don't have dysphoria. By the way, a lot of those people are people who already had their dysphoria removed with therapies. Now, if transgenderism was inherently a mental illness, then it wouldn't be possible for you to alleviate that dysphoria or not alleviate dysphoria. It wouldn't be possible even after those therapies to not have mental illness, because by definition, you would still have mental illness because you're transgender, and that's it. You would always have it. the point here is just that they're not the same thing. Just because there's commonalities or similarities in the first set of definitions, in the first set of criteria, doesn't mean they're the same definition, because there is a required definition. There's a required criteria that is not present in the other one. And yes, I know trans people who don't have dysphoria. You may not admit, but just saying that I haven't met one,
let me ask, your trans friend or person that doesn't have dysphoria, do they just present as the gender or sex they were born and they do nothing to change it?
No, they do certain things to change it, but they don't have.
Why
they
would
don't
they
have
change
significant.
It if they're entirely unbothered?
Because they prefer. Because they. It's not that they're entirely unbothered.
Or
it's that they prefer it.
So, like, how do we measure the degree of bothered?
That's just going to be an So that's an epistemic question, and I'd be happy to discuss that with you. But that's not the topic of the debate. Like, regardless of how we measure it, that's just going to be an epistemic question, not a principal question.
I'm genuinely curious. I am. Like, if you went up to your friend,
I
and
agree.
Said,
you're curious, but
no. Like, if you went up to your friend and said, "Okay, you have to," is it male to female or female to male? Just for the sake of this question, your friend, are they male to female or?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, the person is male to female.
Male to female. Okay, so if you said you have to live appearing like a male for the rest of your life, you're not allowed to make any changes. Do you think they would be significantly distressed by that?
According to that person, well, so if someone imposed that on them, I don't know. If someone like forced them to do it, that's introducing another variable. What this person has told me is that they. What this person has told me.
If they couldn't do something to alleviate it, do you think they'd be significantly distressed?
If they couldn't do something to alleviate it, what this person has told me is that they were still able to get along with their life just fine. It's just that they prefer it.
So they've just changed their gender because they prefer it, and if Look, there are some people. Look, I'm not saying this is the majority. So is transgenderism a choice then?
Is being a I don't think. Well, no, I don't think it is entailed that it's a choice. Look, having a preference doesn't mean
like they can choose one day
itself.
And not really care that much.
No. That's not entailed. Because you can have. Look, I'm just saying there are certain things that constitute their preferences, and those things form the gender. I'm not saying that they are making a choice to do this or not. There are certain inclinations that they've had that are just not to the level that they cause
one way or another.
Stop, Lauren. You're not again when you keep saying it doesn't bother them. That's not what I'm saying either. Stop.
No, but if it doesn't bother them to the point where they could be fine living the other way, like you just said, you were the one who said that they would be fine living the other way, then it kind of sounds like it's a choice.
Stop, Lauren. You're okay. So what I said was that they don't get to the level where it's significant distress. Okay, that's what I said. Now, every time when you go and you say, "Oh, well, they're just fine. It doesn't bother them either way." It's not. I didn't say it doesn't bother them either way. When you keep framing it like that, it looks comedic to the other side. So it is. All I'm saying is it's possible for that to happen. Now, again, I'll just point out that they're not the same thing because one requires this, the other doesn't. I don't want to cascade off in the weeds here because all the questions of how we measure it, the questions of the nature of gender, questions about medical interventions, which I tried to have a conversation with you before. I would love to have these conversations with you, Lauren, but that's not the debate topic.
Well, Avi,
I want to know.
Avi, I think that we can kind of switch gears because you guys are kind of talking in circles a little bit. So maybe if we talk more about like mental health and transgender and kind of the solutions, I think everybody here agrees that suicide rates are really high and those that identify as transgender. I would love to have,
and I'd be happy to do that.
Because you guys are in like a semantic argument and you're just talking in circles.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, but this is the debate proposition that was posed. What I would like to do. By the way, I would like to, and if Lauren Witzke will agree that she has no counter argument to the argument that I put forward, I'd be happy to talk with Lauren Southern and Lauren Witzke about what we should do about the mental health conditions. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to talk about that data.
I think
instead of going into this
way to go with
this. Yeah, I'd like to do that.
You guys are never going to agree, and it's just going to be circular.
Yeah. So anyway, moving on to about the suicide rates. Also, I find it very interesting that every American institution, we're looking at academia, the U.S. government corporations, they all support trans rights. However, their suicide rates are still getting worse. Now this is an issue that we need to confront. Do we really need to start empowering something that is a self-destructive mental illness? Because the more we empower it, the worse things seem to get for this demographic of people. I'd like to ask Avi the question, listen, like, why are we empowering a lifestyle that is hurting people, that is driving people to suicide, that is driving people to self-mutilation? You can't make the excuse that we're the problem. It's because we oppose transgenders, or we make them feel like we're less than. No, because every American institution supports them, and we're watching as they are deteriorating as people, as human beings, and getting worse. So why would we want to enable and make excuses for less? So actually, they even went to the extent of banning conversion therapy. It's banned in my home state of Delaware. People don't even have a right to change their mind, to talk through things, to work through childhood trauma that is causing them to have these self-mutilating, suicidal thoughts.
So I'd be happy to answer that question when you're going to tell me which premise. When you square up, when we finish off with the debate proposition, which is what we've been invited to debate, I'd be happy to go through the data with you with conversion therapies. I'd be happy to discuss the data with you on the effect of conversion therapies on suicide effects. I'd be happy to talk about all of that.
Avi,
sorry, what?
Hi.
Go ahead.
Because it's more of a panel, and I know like you want a very direct debate topic, but when you're having like these 4 different people, you're gonna have to kind of like wiggle it a bit, because not everybody's gonna have the same exact positions. So I do want to kind of expand it a little bit and not just like narrow on this one particular thing, and maybe you can have it.
Well, this was the debate. Well, Brittany, this was the debate proposition.
But I had to kind of like wiggle it even like with that alone, because you guys.
Oh, well, look, if Lauren, I'll tell you what, like if Lauren Witzke will grant that she cannot say which premise she rejects or cannot substantiate which premise is false, then I'd be happy to move on to the prescriptive or other topics. But until that happens, I'm going to stick to the argument that I presented for the debate proposition that I've been invited to, that that Lauren Witzke has also been invited to.
But I also do want to give Mouthy some time to talk as well.
Sure, Mouthy will be happy to do the same. Go ahead, Mouthy.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like people are like I guess objecting to me and Avi by saying that the argument is sort of semantic. I mean, it sounds like the issue isn't with our argument; the issue is with the proposition itself, right? I mean, if we want to just say that like the proposition is irrelevant, we don't really we don't really care about what the topic actually is. I mean, that's fine. You can say that. But yeah, I mean, I guess there hasn't really been a clear counter argument to the argument as put forward on the issue of whether or not being trans is a mental illness. But
actually, I do want to make the point that when we talked about doing this, it was going to be a panel discussion. So that's why I'm kind of like, well, I guess I lost. You brought up the Dsm-5. I didn't realize this was going to be we're trying to get someone to concede to our point, and point by point, here's my calculation, you lose, checkmate. Like, I actually thought we were going to have a discussion here today, but it doesn't sound like we're doing that. It sounds like you want
Lauren,
to get your big W.
Well, Lauren, actually, a discussion is actually what I've wanted to have with you and what I've tried to have with you. But I think it's unfortunate that we're meeting in terms like this rather than having a good faith discussion. Rather than
I'm glad you admit you're not being good faith. I do appreciate
no,
that.
No. Just to be clear. No. I'm not saying I'm not. I think I actually am being good faith with respect to this. But I'm just saying it's a debate instead of a discussion, and it's more like it's more aggressive. And I would have rather had a discussion with you. That is good faith with both of us. Again, not saying I'm not being good faith here, but I'd rather have a discussion on the more prescriptive and meaningful topics, like does gender affirming surgeries decrease the risk of suicide, or does conversion therapy for Lauren Witzke, does conversion therapy decrease the risk of suicide? I would have liked to have discussions with that, but unfortunately, here we are with this debate proposition.
Well,
now,
so you,
I'm happy to move
because you've sat here and you've pushed Witzke. You've been like, you have to let me know if you concede on the premise now, but you haven't actually said, okay, that's an interesting like thought you've got there. You've met a lot of people that really, really struggle with suicide all the time. Like, you know, it's give me the premise, concede.
Yeah, because because it's tangential. Yeah, because even if what Lauren Witzke says is true, it still wouldn't falsify either of the premises, and therefore the conclusion would still follow. Now, if Lauren Witzke wants to say that she still wants to reject the conclusion, then she has to falsify one of the premises. What
but
Lauren
you're getting
Witzke
into
is
debate, bro, like up here stuff again instead of just a conversation.
Calling it debate, bro. I'll just say one thing. Calling it debate, bro, doesn't change anything about it. Calling it debate, bro, doesn't change the fact that the conclusion hasn't been falsified. It doesn't change the fact that the premise of the argument has not been falsified. And so it just seems like a way that, by the way, a lot of left-wingers use a weird cope, calling something debate, bro, to get out of when they're stuck by an argument. It's really weak. Please don't do it. Yeah, calling it debate, bro, doesn't change anything. So, but I will say, Lauren, I still do want to have a conversation. The reason, and I'm disappointed that we're meeting at terms that, with a debate proposition like this, that is the debate proposition. I'm happy to debate that until.
But again, it is like more of like an open, I mean, because we said that we were doing it as like a more of a panel and is going to be a little bit more open. That's why Ask Yourself didn't want to be a part of it. So, I mean, we can have it expand a little bit instead of such like a narrow discussion on this particular.
And again, I said,
can everybody see your viewers see the list that Avi has submitted? He wrote out a little paragraph that says, basically, it gives us 3 options on how we're going to concede. So if I had known, I would have prepared my own paragraph, actually the counter offer. I'll get that to you, but it's really funny. You guys should show your viewers, because it's like, oh, this is how you're going to concede. Option 1. Option 2. Here's another way you can concede. Option 3.
I'm going to show my viewers.
It's like, what?
Why are you
This is
making
the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
I didn't say any of it.
I see it. I mean, it's right there. Can you show it to everybody?
Thing in chat.
Let's put it in the chat. This is what Avi decided we could choose from. How's that?
Wait. Are you talking about the argument? Wow, yeah. Are you that stupid? Like, you're talking about the argument? That's not the ways that you could concede. That's what an argument is.
Yeah, it is.
It's premises and a conclusion.
No,
it's not the ways you have to
concede. Wow,
you are so. Oh my God. Okay, look. Okay, I'm gonna have to dumb this down for a second. Okay, look. When argument is a series of premises and a conclusion, that's not me saying here's how you're going to concede or that's how you're going to concede. Maybe you can reject one of the premises. Okay, well, you're wrong. Maybe you can actually falsify one of the premises. Maybe not. But that's not the same thing as me saying, oh, well, here's how you're going to concede. No, it's a formal argument that you haven't interacted with. So
I've interacted this whole time. I've given really good points, actually, I think.
Okay,
I'm just confused as how you became the ringleader of the debate. And these are I think we have 2 moderators.
I think the point is that this is a panel discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to look, I'll just point out, that's fine. We can move on to the discussion. I'll just point out that you haven't falsified any premise.
I think I've done a pretty good job.
And if you want to move on to prescriptions, you think you have? Then what premise is false? You keep every time I'm willing to move on, you keep bringing me back. Look. If you are granting that you have no response to the argument, and if you, in the sense that you can't falsify a premise, then just say so and we can move on. Otherwise, yes, I'm going to point out, if you haven't interacted with the argument, that you haven't.
I think I've made really good points about my arguments, presenting the data and, the end results of what transgenderism brings. I think that that's really all I need to do. I don't have to concede to any of your demands that you put in the beginning of the debate. If I had known, I would have brought my own. But,
Okay, so
you haven't convinced me otherwise that it is. You're not going to change my mind.
whether I've
I don't
convinced you or not,
participate in your kind of delusions. Also, I think the DSM-5 was written by radical leftists. So you also have that side of data. There's hardly any clinical trials. They refuse to actually do these clinical trials or run studies on transgenderism because they don't want people to know how bad it actually is. Because if they knew.
What premise do you think that you falsified, Lauren? Go ahead. What premise? One or two? There's only two. Yeah, what premise? One or two? There's only two premises.
I don't agree with any of them.
Okay, so premise one is analytically entailed. So
I already explained the fact that transgender people can have multiple mental illnesses.
Hold on.
This is like a common thing.
Wait, hold on. You think premise one is false? Is that the case? Wait, I want to hear this from you. Do you think premise one is false?
All right. If transgenderism is a mental illness, then it's not logically possible for a transgender person to not have a mental illness. Like, this is like a decorated word salad. What does this even mean? What are you trying to prove?
Well, if you don't know what it means,
why are you saying that you don't understand? I think it's a mental illness. You haven't proven otherwise because you said, oh, well, they're not distressed, so it's not a mental illness. But I see a lot of people cutting off their parts, and they look pretty distressed to me. I'm just going to say, Lauren, that they look pretty distressed. So that was your argument.
You're not even understanding what the premise even said. It's a conditional statement. It's saying if transgenderism is, it's not even asserting that it's not or is. It's saying if transgenderism is a mental illness, if that's the case, then it wouldn't be possible for a transgender person to not have a mental illness. It's a material conditional statement. So it's like, okay, look, I think I could just, if, for example, schizophrenia. If schizophrenia is a mental illness, then it wouldn't be possible for a schizophrenic person, for a person with schizophrenia, to not have a mental illness. Do you agree with that? I agree with that.
Wouldn't that mean that they have a mental illness?
No, it wouldn't, because it's an implication premise. It's not saying, in an implication premise, the antecedent can be false and the implication can be true. So it's saying if not saying that a person does have schizophrenia, if someone has schizophrenia, then it's not possible for them to not have a mental illness, meaning they must have a mental illness. Do you agree with that?
I'm not saying, because I don't know what you're trying to say. I really don't know. I really don't understand. I know you're trying to confuse me, and I'm not agreeing to anything. I don't agree with any of it. So I don't know what you're trying to say.
What's hard to understand about it? I think.
I don't know. I don't know what you're doing, but I know that you are sneaky. You are sneaky, and I am not going to make any commitments to any stance on anything because I don't trust you. So that's why I have the right.
Well, that's interesting because you already Mouthy, you can go. Go explain what premise is, Mouthy.
Yeah, so it might be helpful to think about sort of like other examples of because the argument that Avi put forth is in sort of logical terms, it's called modus tollens. And so like another example of that kind of an argument would be like, if I'm sleeping in my bed, then I'm in my room, but I'm not sleeping in my bed, therefore I'm not in my room. So all this argument is just trying to say is like, look, if you are going to take the position that transgenderism is a mental illness, then in virtue of you taking that position, it's going to be true that it isn't like logically possible. Like there's some contradiction in there being somebody who is transgender, but who doesn't have a mental illness. And so that's the first premise. And then the second premise is just saying, but look, it is clearly logically possible for there to be someone who is transgender, but doesn't have a mental illness. And therefore, because the entailment of your conclusion is false, that means your conclusion is false. Like that's kind of the idea.
Someone in my chat made a good point here. They're like, he's not sneaky. He just speaks in a way that is so formally structured that it's alien to many regular people. And like, no, I agree that you obviously have got a structured, logical argument here. But once again, we come back to we're having a panel discussion, and I'm not. That's what I mean when I say debate bro tactics. I mean we're having like a normal level person conversation here. And I don't know if you can do that without getting deep into the philosophy, logic stuff. But could we try that?
Avi, just like one thing to keep in mind is that the
Well, look,
audience
I'm happy. Look,
isn't like doctors, so they're not going to be able to follow like this high level logical argument that you're presenting. If you could just,
I'm happy to put it in natural language. That's fine. No, it's fine. I'm happy to put it in natural language. Look. Yeah, sure, no problem. So the point here is just that when you say something is a mental illness, that means that if someone has this mental illness, then it's not possible for them to not have a mental illness because they have a mental illness. It's really that simple. Now, if someone has a condition, and you want to say that this condition
repeat
is a mental
that first
illness.
bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. Look, if someone has a condition, let's call it condition X or whatever. If someone has a condition, if that condition is a mental illness, right? So long as this person has that condition, it's not possible for them to not have a mental illness. Clearly,
but if
because
it is a mental illness, wouldn't
illness.
they have? That doesn't make any sense, because if they have a mental illness, then they have a mental illness.
Well, yeah, that's trivially true, is it not? Look, if someone has a mental illness, if someone has something and that something is a mental illness, then is it possible for them to not have a mental illness while they have this thing? And the answer is no, because they have this thing and this thing is a mental illness. It's really just that simple.
Right.
So while someone is transgender and feeling incongruent with their body, technically, if you believe that transgenderism is a mental illness, they will always have a mental illness and they can never be cured of it. That's like
so long as they are transgender. So long as they have transgender.
Why is that an inconsistent belief? Because like I could say so.
Well, no, that's premise one. That's just,
they'll always have a mental illness.
No, that's just premise one, Lauren.
Okay.
No, that's premise one. Premise one is just saying that if something is a mental illness, if someone has this thing, so long as they have this thing, it is not possible for them not to have a mental illness.
Right. Okay.
Because they have this thing, which is a mental illness. Okay.
Oh, okay. So now then you're saying.
Premise two is, but it is logically possible for someone to have transgenderism while not being mentally ill.
And that being that transgenderism is a mental illness.
Right. Can I, because I'm following, but then this comes down to what I was trying to get at earlier. Maybe I didn't explain myself well enough, but we basically have to argue what level of distress then is, the limit. So like you've said, well, your friend who doesn't feel that bothered or isn't entirely bothered by transitioning or not transitioning or presenting or not presenting, they don't have a level of distress to the point where it would be considered a mental illness by the DSM-5. Now, when I pressed you on that and I asked, well, if your friend was told they could never make any changes to their face and they had to live as a man their whole life instead of a woman, would they be distressed by that? This is going to come into a conversation of what is the level of distress, because I would almost go to the point of saying, if it is just a preference, if they could live as a man and they don't care, is that even necessarily, are they even necessarily transgender, or are they just cross-dressing, right? So then we're getting into that kind of discussion.
So the point just is that someone can meet the criteria for being transgender without meeting the criteria for gender dysphoria. Now, your question of how we measure it, the question of what level is enough versus not enough. These are just going to be epistemic questions. How we measure the level.
Is your friend just cross-dressing, or are they transgender? Like, let's.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think they're transgender. I think they have inclinations such that they want to be treated a certain way. They prefer to be treated a certain way. They prefer to look a certain way. They prefer to act a certain way. In accord with the archetypical, the way the archetypical female is treated, the way an archetypical female looks, the way the archetypical female presents herself. So yeah, I mean, I think they are transgender. It's just that I
disagree.
Don't experience. Well, okay. Well, look.
I think that cross-dressers, it's a sexual fetish thing that they have. Like where it is. It's not. I mean, it's not transgenderism. It's completely different. It's more so based on a sexual fetish type thing with cross-dressers, as opposed to transgenders who literally are so broken on the inside that they feel like they need to transition into another gender, take hormone replacement therapy, cut off their parts, self-mutilate themselves. It's completely different. And that is, and that's way different. Come on, Doc, you should know that.
But we're not talking about a cross-dresser here. What we're talking about is someone who is transgender without gender dysphoria. No, but that's not what I was talking about.
Okay, Abby. No, I'm curious. What is how would you separate someone who isn't transgender and is transgender? Like, are there any defined limits there for you? Sure.
So I think it's more of a cluster concept in terms of when you say defined limit, if what you mean by that is that there's this line,
barriers.
Yeah, if there is this line, so there are barriers, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. What I'm trying to get at is if what you mean is a clear delineation without any gray area.
Well, what I'm basically my argument, I'll let you just know so that we can be clear. What I'm suggesting is that I don't think there is actually much variation between the DSM-5 definition of gender dysphoria and transgenderism as I see it manifest in the day-to-day world. And that is why I don't think it's an entirely absurd statement when people say transgenderism is a mental illness. Now, perhaps when they say that they mean gender dysphoria, and you could be correct that on a technical level, transgenderism itself isn't a mental illness in this hypothetical, but because the definitions are almost so directly correlated, it's actually not that inaccurate to make that statement is what I'm suggesting. So that's why I'm asking, I think what we've gotten down to that point is, what is that level of distress? Is there actually, do you have to have a level of distress that makes you really want to transition to be transgender? Or is transgenderism, and this is what I was getting to earlier, just a choice that someone can make on any given day?
So I think that's a false dichotomy. So I don't think those are the only two options. I don't think it's either you have to have so much distress or it's just a choice. I think people can have inclinations that are not their choices and act in accord with them. People can have dispositions that they act in accord with. And they may make choices to do certain things, but that wouldn't mean that transgenderism is a choice, because transgenderism, and this goes to your question of asking me about your questions of gender, those are, to me, the inclinations that people have. There are certain characteristics that people have. The desire to be treated a certain way with the archetypical sex that they weren't assigned at birth, the desire to look a certain way in accord with the archetypical sex they weren't assigned at birth, etc. Those things are not going to be choices. They're not.
But I can literally wake up. I have woken up and desired to be a man, and been I wish I were a dude so I didn't have to pee sitting down this morning. Does that make me transgender, or is there a cutoff point? Is it just desire that we define?
No, there would be a cutoff point. Yeah. There would be it would be a cluster concept or similar to a cluster concept of different weighted characteristics of. And at some point, at some threshold, there would be a point at which you really actually are a man. If you really had enough of those,
I have to feel hard enough to become a man. I have to feel it.
No.
Desire it strongly enough.
Lauren, this is the thing. Okay, wait. So
no, I'm genuinely curious there.
Okay. All right. So if you had enough of the mental characteristics that you consider yourself in line with the archetypical man. You want to be treated like the archetypical man. You want to look like the archetypical man. You want to interact with society in the way that an archetypical man interacts in society, etc. Those things. If you had,
do I have to want that to a certain degree? Do I have to want that really badly?
Really badly to the point that you would be distressed if not? No.
Right, because that would destroy your argument. So you can't accept that premise, right? When I say I just kind of feel it, that's not good enough. I have to really want it, but I can't want it enough for it to distress me.
No. I didn't say. Wait. I didn't say that. No, you're misrepresenting what I said now. Well, no, Okay, so now this is bad faith because now you're misrepresenting.
I'm genuinely not
I
trying
didn't
to be
say,
bad faith. I'm saying if I agree with you that the definition of transgenderism is not just like a random preference one day where you feel that. I think you actually have to have a pretty strong desire. And I do think when you have a strong desire for something, if you don't get that thing, it usually distresses you, especially when it's something as big as how you look, how your body is. Like that is very distressing.
Okay,
so I'm saying that there's very...
I see the point of disagreement. If you let me talk, I see the point of contention. So the response, so I don't think you have to have a very strong, if you have all of those characteristics, all those mental characteristics where they lean masculine and they're not very strong, but they do lean masculine, I think I would still consider this person a man. Like this person is gendered male. I mean, not male, man. This person is a masculine, has a masculine gender on my view, even if they didn't feel strongly about it. The confusion that we had was that when you just said, I wake up and I feel like a man one day, the confusion I had was that it seemed to be that there was only one domain in which you had this leaning. But if you actually woke up and you had all of the leanings in all the different domains, you said, you know what, on average, I don't have a very strong, an incredibly strong leaning, but I have some leaning, some moderate leaning. Not tiny, but not really.
There's a good question actually now. So would it be, why couldn't, if I woke up and had a moderate feeling, couldn't I just be a, masculine person with a female sex, right? Like I'm a masculine woman, right? At what point does it have to then be defined as I am the other gender?
Sure. Yeah. So gender is going to be differentiated from masculinity and femininity in several ways. So it depends how you define it, but the idea is that there are internal inclinations, there are internal mental characteristics that are gendered, and then there are certain characteristics that are just that are masculine and feminine that wouldn't weigh as much in the gendered spectrum. So first, for example,
that didn't make sense to me. Yeah, okay.
Sure. Okay, so I can elaborate. I'm just going to give examples. So for example, if someone is a woman and a female and they happen to have facial hair that they don't desire, for example, that facial hair is a masculinizing feature, right? It's a masculinizing feature, but we wouldn't say that this person is a man. We would say this is a woman who has certain masculine features. However, when we talk about people's internal inclinations and desires, if this female had desires to look like the archetypical man, she desired that hair. She didn't just it wasn't unwanted. She wanted it because it was masculine. She desired to be treated like a man. She desired to do all these things. That's a different type of characteristic.
But couldn't I just desire to be treated like a masculine female? Like, couldn't I just desire to play that gender role instead of
you can? But the reason I'm separating, you can. There's a little bit of.
So what's the separate? Yeah, why is there that separation? And here's the point where I think that separation is someone has gender dysphoria. I don't know if it's usually cutting out to the point where it's so extreme that they.
Sorry, really I think we just had a little bit of lag there. Well, I can
heard it fine. I think it's on your end.
There could be two different desires. Someone can desire to be a. Okay, cool. So, all right, maybe it's mine. So someone can desire to be a masculine female. That's fine. Someone can desire to be a masculine woman, and someone can desire to be a masculine man. What I'm saying is, if someone desires to be a masculine man, that's a gendered characteristic. If someone desires to be a masculine woman, that is not going to be the same gender character. Yeah, go ahead, Lauren. You wanted to?
Oh no, sorry, someone subscribed.
Do you see the difference?
Hello.
Yeah. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. So the differentiation is, yes, you can be a masculine woman, but I just wouldn't consider that to be the same gendered characteristic as someone who desires to be a masculine man. Like, that's going to have much more weight in the gender characteristic.
But what? I'm actually not following. Like, I don't. Why can't I be a woman that has a beard and is butch and does all these things? Like, what is inherently?
Yeah,
I think the inherent thing when we say man is they're actually talking about the sex instead of the gender, which is why people tend to get surgery, which is why it gets to a deeper level like that. So you haven't defined what is a masculine man versus a butch female. What is that? What are the differences?
No, I have. No. Yeah. So well, I
other
just
than
did.
The sex.
The different.
Other than
no.
Their genitals.
Okay, so I did. So I'll do it again. So the difference is, I gave you the distinction. One of the distinction is if this individual has a desire to be a man versus a woman, if they desire to be treated in accord with the archetypical sex that they do not have. They want to be treated in a certain way. They
desire to be like the sex, not the masculine or the feminine.
Yes.
That's they desire to be treated like
that's fine.
The biologically different sex, not actually a different gender, which means then...
Okay, sure. Yeah. Which means what?
Then typically they would have an incongruence with what their body is, right? Like they would feel in their mind at least to some degree, because that's going to be the biggest difference.
But not necessarily.
If masculinity and femininity are separated from sexual aspects, so your genitals, then it should, if they feel to be treated on a personal, emotional, societal level as a male, they can just be a masculine female. But it's when you talk about wanting to be a man, that's getting down to the sex aspect where they actually want to have a penis. They want to biologically be the other gender or other sex.
Or they want to, well, that's one of the characters, sure. Yeah, so, but the point here is just that this desire to be treated or to have things in accord with the archetypical sex that they aren't assigned at birth is not, it doesn't have to be to the point where they have severe distress in order for them to be transgender.
This is the point that we would okay, so I get that, and I accept your point. I understand that's the point you're making. I think it logically follows, but the point we are disagreeing on is I actually don't think, just being a human being, I don't think I could desire for my body to look so different and not be distressed to a great degree. I do not think I could desire to be something so different from what I am, and men and women are very different. I don't think I could desire that to even a bit of a degree, or a consistent degree rather. I don't think I could desire that on a daily basis and not be put in a significant amount of stress. And I think that we see that manifest regularly in the transgender community, which is why we have such high suicide rates, such high mental illness rates, because that is the average amongst humans. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is like a very small percentage that literally are unaffected by that. Sure.
Well, Lauren, let me ask you this. Hold on. Let me just ask you this then. Okay. So let's say, like, even if we grant that everyone who is transgender has this, it's to the point where they have significant clinical distress. Wouldn't they still have a mental disorder after they've been cured of their gender dysphoria? Like, let's say we do these transition therapies, we give them the hormones, we give them the surgeries, and then after that they have no gender dysphoria anymore. There's no incongruency. They have zero gender dysphoria. On your view, and let's just say it's cured, there's no chance of a relapse, they're not going to regrow a penis, right? So let's just say hypothetically there was no chance of a relapse. They were cured of gender dysphoria. Would that cure them of transgenderism as well? Or would you say they're still transgender, but they don't have dysphoria? Because there are plenty of people who do have that.
I see what you're saying there. And like, so you're saying if they get rid of the dysphoria, which is the thing that's causing them the distress, will they have a mental illness? I'm not sure. I'd actually have to think about that one a bit. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, because the point is that
I think they're going to struggle with both, and I don't really think we have any cases of people who have worked through, like, it's going to be something that people are going to struggle with, and that's okay. It takes work. It takes supplementary therapy, and it's not just an insta cure. I don't even think that's ever happened. It's always going to be something. I think it's more so goes back to self-torment, like where they're literally tormented. They were born into this world and they were shoved lies, told that, hey, this isn't who you are. You were just born in the wrong body. You have to transition. You have to conform to this society. And it's a form of pressure and it's a form of torment. A lot of people, like we said, are sexually abused as children. They grow up to become transgenders, and they continue the cycle of molesting other children. It's kind of like it's like a projection from their own pain and hurt. But here's the thing, you can't just cure it. It's going to be something that people struggle with, battle with. It's also spiritual as well. You can't tell me that there isn't a spiritual battle going on for people's souls, especially now. And I believe that transgenderism, the whole essence of the LGBTQ mafia, there's some really, really strong darkness that operates in that wants people dead. It wants you to kill yourself. There's an enemy who hates you. He wants you to be confused about who God made you, your identity in Christ. And that's the truth. So I don't really think that's a good argument. I don't think that's a good argument, because you're saying, well, what if they got rid of the gender dysphoria? Are they still transgender? No, this is something that people are going to struggle with. We all struggle with sin. And if it's not that, it's going to be something else. So I don't think that's a legitimate argument. And I don't think we have ever documented a case where people have been healed of gender dysphoria, where it's just they went through therapy, went through treatment, and just cut it off. It's a mindset that people have to work through. So yes, they would still be transgender.
So here's the
just like I'll be an addict for the rest of my life. I still have those addictive things just because I'm not using. So it's the same thing.
Yeah. So there are certain. Yeah, exactly. There are certain. So this is the point I was distinguishing between. There are certain conditions that we don't have cures for and that we treat, and they're chronic conditions. The reason we keep people with diagnosis of schizophrenia and we keep them have that diagnosis is because we don't have a cure for schizophrenia. We can treat it. We can give them antipsychotics and treat them, but we don't have a cure for it. If we did, by the way, if we did have a cure for it, then we would not consider them schizophrenics. For example, we have this in other areas of medicine. Like if someone has an infection, if someone has a bacterial infection, we don't just have treatments for that, we have cures for that. And we don't keep that on their medical record that they have as an active diagnosis. Once we cure it, we acknowledge that it's gone. The point here is that gender dysphoria is a curable mental illness. It's a mental illness, not for everyone maybe, but for at least some people, not everyone, but for some people, their dysphoria goes away and just doesn't come back after a intervention. It does.
Right.
For at least some people, it's a curable condition. Now the point here is, if we acknowledge that for at least some transgender people, gender dysphoria is a curable condition, then the question remains, if they don't have gender dysphoria anymore, but they are still transgender, do they still have a mental illness? That's the $1 million question that I'm asking Lauren Sadler.
Well, I think it's the same thing. So, okay, I'll let Lauren answer. Sorry.
No. I'm thinking, I know my chat will probably take the piss with this, but I actually, I do think that is a bit of a more, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but that is getting into higher questions about what is even this conversation about mental illness. I do think it gets into aspects of spirituality. I think it gets into aspects of a sense of self. Like even after you change your physical body to become what you believe you should be in your mind, let's put this into something else. Like if someone we see people that are want to become animals, for example. If someone were to be able to get enough surgeries. Oh, I'm getting feedback. Who's giving me feedback? All right, are we good? To become an animal, would you no longer have a mental incongruence with your body and therefore no longer be mentally ill? Or is the inherent aspect of you wanting to be an animal in the first place something that just never leaves you, something that will always technically be a little kind of crack in your brain that's a little odd and a little different from a regular person? Because, we must acknowledge that mental illness itself is kind of defined by our culture. Like I said, female hysteria was something that used to be a mental illness, right? So I do think this gets into a much deeper kind of philosophical question rather than I don't know. I'd have to really think on that.
Well, the point, Laura, is it's more simple. The point is just that there are plenty of people who are cured of their dysphoria, yet they remain transgender. Now, if the idea is to just say, well, there's just this huge overlap between, like, I don't know anyone who's transgender and doesn't have gender dysphoria, but clearly you certainly are going to know a lot of people. I suspect a lot of people would, who have had their dysphoria removed, who don't have dysphoria anymore, whether it be through a given intervention or given surgery or given hormonal therapy. There are plenty of people like that. So there are plenty of people who are transgender but don't have dysphoria. That's the point.
Right, but like,
so the point is
what
that
Lauren was saying earlier.
So you're saying that they've transitioned their bodies, but then they cured their dysphoria. Is that what you're saying? But they still have,
their dysphoria
they've
is
done
gone,
the surgery. Okay.
Well, it coincided with
the idea is there are plenty of
Oh. Okay. Well, no, I was just going to bring up I actually thought it was an interesting point that Lauren made, which was, she was saying, I may not be addicted anymore, but I'm still an addict. So was that what you were trying to say, Lauren? Like, you still inherently have these mental impulses?
Yeah, I get that. But also I get the difference between somebody being set free by Christ, from their torment, from their pain, from their depression, from their gender dysphoria. What's so funny? I was a Christian when you brought me on, but then there's a difference between people managing mental illness in the natural. So going to therapy, getting help, maybe taking the right medications because they have a chemical imbalance. There's two different things. Like, I truly do believe that Christ can set people free, and people can leave it all behind. However, there is also a process for recovery as well. So, they could help manage their gender dysphoria. Some people that go to therapy or get the chemical imbalances in their brain corrected, but they've already transitioned their bodies. I understand that's what you're saying.
The reason I was laughing wasn't because you mentioned it. The reason I was laughing is because if you believe that Christ can cure people of their gender dysphoria, then you also presumably believe that it's possible to be transgender without having gender dysphoria, because Christ can cure someone.
Actually, no. I want to suggest, put something else forward. Would it be fair to say that you're actually not getting rid of it per se, but you've almost put it into there's a word I'm looking for, not remission.
You're putting it in remission is what you want to say.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I mentioned before. That's why I mentioned before that there's this doesn't tend to be a condition that is like that. Like, for example,
dormant.
When we look at certain things like various cancers, right? Sometimes a cancer can go into, there are certain cancers that can go into remission. There are certain cancers that you can cure. If you have a basal cell or squamous cell carcinoma of the skin, you can cure that. You're not putting it in remission, you're curing it. However, if you have metastatic lung cancer and you give the person chemo, you put it in remission. The point I'm making here is that for some people, gender dysphoria may operate as if it's in remission. So, for example, their gender dysphoria is alleviated by hormonal therapy, but then it comes back and then they need surgery, and then maybe it'll come back after that. Who knows? However, there are also some people that have gender dysphoria and it's gone after surgery and hormonal therapy and never comes back.
No, but the point is, if they were to start looking the other gender again, they'd still have that dysphoria, right? They still, for the rest of their life, will be wanting to be.
Well, the point is that but the point is that for some people they don't. That's the point. For some people that the point I'm making is that for some people they operate as if they really are cured of it. They are. It's not like it's a remission thing where it can come back. Well, no, because
if they reversed the surgeries, then they would still probably, I presume, unless they were completely unhappy with their surgeries.
No. But that's not what gender dysphoria is. Gender dysphoria is not. It's not the condition of, well, if you did not look the way you currently looked, then you would have severe distress. It is the case of you actually have severe distress in virtue of how you look now. So the point is that if you have these interventions, you can actually, for some people at least, cure dysphoria rather than put it in remission. And given that that's the case, there are quite a few transgender individuals who really don't have gender dysphoria.
Well, that's an entirely different debate that I'm sure we'll set up for another day. Yeah, I don't even know if I have anything
All
else
right,
to say
well,
on this topic. I'll be
yeah.
honest.
We can get into the Q&A.
Before we do it, the one thing I'd like to discuss that with you, Lauren. I'd also like to discuss the gender affirming surgery video, the data. As I spoke to AJ just today, and he agreed with me that the data does strongly, the best available data supports gender affirming surgery.
I think that's the big point, is the best available data, and that we don't have much or any good data, and it's almost gotten to a point where I don't even want to discuss the topic anymore because the data is so bad.
Well, we do. Well, actually,
we can talk about that. We can talk about whether we have good data or not.
It's interesting. Well, we can, because it's interesting because you described the data for Bradstrong and Pachinkas as okay instead of bad data, but now that we agree that there's even better data than that, all of a sudden it's pretty bad. I do think that's a little bit interesting. So it's
at least better data.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, there is. Oh, you don't? Because you've cited the better data in your own video, even though you didn't use it. So that's interesting too.
I genuinely, I think that all of the data is poor, and that was the conclusion of my video, was that all of the data is poor. There is some better data and some worse data, but overall, we don't have enough data, was what the conclusion was.
Actually, your own words was that you described the Bradstrom and Pachinkas data as okay data. Those were your words.
Okay.
And presumably if transitivity holds, then if better data than Bradstrom and Pachinkas comes along, then it would be at least okay.
About right now.
Okay, well, I can give you the quotes if you'd like. You described data. You described some data as bad, and you described some data as okay. You described Bradstrom and Pachinkas as okay. Well, the point is that it's not bad data; it's okay data. Like, data is not either good or bad.
Well,
some data is okay data.
I was saying comparatively to other data available. Okay. I think that overall, even Bradstrom and Pachinkas, I think that it's all still not great data. We need more. But comparatively to the other transgender data available, it had a high sample size. That's probably why I used the word okay. But I really think you're nitpicking to the point where I don't even know what you're talking about.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine. No. The point I'm making is that there's far better data than Bradstrom and Pachinkas that has even greater sample size, but also appropriately done controls. That it was done very rigorously. And so that's the conversation that I'd like to have with you, because I spoke to your data expert in your video, and your data expert agrees that not only were there errors in your video, straightforward errors, not necessarily your fault, but his fault as well. But that's fine. So I'd like that video to be corrected, and the best available data, which is better than Bradstrom and Pachinkas, to reflect that it does support gender affirming surgeries. That conversation I'd like to have as well.
Now I know you're going to tweet at me for like 3 months, a video of me saying I'd have this conversation.
Yeah.
It's going to be...
Well, no, I'll tell you what. Let's look. But hold on. But Lauren, look. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's do it like this. I won't do that. But like, here's my gripe. I'll level with you. My gripe is I see you accepting debates from people who aren't equipped to have debates on certain empirical topics. People like Destiny, who's not equipped to debate many of the empirical topics he debates. People like Lance, who's not equipped to debate anything at all, really. Complete idiots. And when it comes to people, but when it comes to people who actually do have have some knowledge in statistics, when people who actually have published, like those people, like these are the people.
We had a conversation before. This is my second conversation with you.
Not
I've
on
had
that.
More chats
not
with
on
you now than I have had with Lance.
We actually didn't have a conversation on the empirical. I said on the empirical topics. We didn't have a conversation on the empirical topic. What we discussed was more of a philosophical topic, and it was only 25 minutes because you had to dip. But anyway,
well, of course I'm going to talk to you on a philosophical topic when I'm not a data scientist. Like, I'll even admit, I'll bring up data, I'll talk about it a little bit, but I'm not going. Yeah, okay. Like, we can. Oh, gosh, I don't even want to say it, because if I don't answer you for 2 weeks, you're going to go off on Twitter.
No. It wasn't 2 weeks, Lauren. It was months, and you know, don't even try. Look,
no one owes you a debate. No one owes you a conversation.
I didn't say you owe me. I didn't say listen. Lauren.
It's not that I'm never going to have one with you. It's that it may be a year. I'll tell you right now, it may be a year until I have a conversation with you again.
Lauren, look.
If I don't feel like it, I'm not going to do it.
That's fine. You don't have to. That's fine. All I'm saying is that when someone is going and they're debating lower tier people and getting away with bullshit, you can't blame someone for calling it out. That's all. Like, I'm gonna call, if you make a false claim, I can call it out.
You're calling Destiny low tier? I think his DGG is gonna be
I think
mad.
he's mid. No. I think he's
right,
middle. No. To be fair, I think he's middle tier. But okay, we can go into the Q&A.
Okay.
I think he's middle tier.
Champions,
At least on
friends.
empirical topic, yeah.
Man, this has been the Avi show, huh? Like, holy hell. All right, so from Cute Root, if trans surgeries are medically critical to treat gender dysphoria, should we also cover surgeries for people who have body dysmorphic disorder?
That's a really good question. So body dysmorphia is where they look in the mirror, say a girl who struggles with bulimia or anorexia looks in the mirror and she sees somebody obese, morbidly obese, but she herself weighs 80 pounds, is starving herself. So they're saying, would we do surgeries, like perform surgeries on the issue of anorexia, bulimia, body dysmorphia issues? Would we put a permanent solution on something that could be treated, is what they're asking. And the same kind of applies with the transgenderism. They struggle with, they look in the mirror and they see that they're supposed to be somebody else. So would we put actually, it's a really good example. Would we put a permanent solution, especially when they're young, especially when they're like 16, 17 years old, give them double mastectomies or, start chemically castrating themselves. These are permanent solutions to issues that can be treated with the right therapy, with the right community connections. And, no, I don't believe that we should offer permanent solutions, especially when we've gotten rid of alternative solutions as well. We treat anorexia and bulimia as a treatable mental health issue. And, the same applies with transgenderism, because it's a mental health issue as well. And we should uphold to that. I'm not really sure why we've taken so much time to, empower and enable a mental illness, especially in the mainstream American academia, government, corporations. Everybody supports this. However, it's hurtful and it's hurting people, and it's very treatable without self-harm or self-mutilation.
Okay, so the major difference is just that there's data showing that, there's good data, by the way, showing that if you treat one a certain way, they respond and they have decreased risk of suicide. The other one, there isn't.
Yeah, I agree with what Avi said. It's sort of just going to be an empirical question. Like when we're asking, should we treat this condition in this way? We just ask, what does the empirical evidence suggest? And it tends to be the case that in the case of trans people, the best treatment is to transition. And I also just wanted to mention that there was sort of an appeal to like, it's a permanent solution, as if almost, the sense I sort of get is that the appeal is that these people will sort of like change their minds or desist, but it happens to be the case that we can actually look at factors in individual people which allow us to predict who's likely to desist and who's likely to not desist, such that like competent clinicians can actually select for people who have traits which make it such that we can be confident that they're not likely going to desist.
Oh, do I get to? You can ask another question. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, we know that desistance, especially amongst younger people, is extremely common. We also know that gender clinics are coming out and publicly stating, there's been recent coverage in the mainstream media with gender clinics saying even they're uncertain how to treat this. They're treating people too quickly, and then they're coming back and desisting or wanting to detransition, which is horrific. So I do think, at the very least, the point being made that, we need to try and be okay with alternative treatments. We need to try and approach things from perhaps instead of just instantly injecting you with something, instead of instantly assuming 100%, let's get you surgery in a 4-month period, which absolutely has happened. People getting surgery or treatment within mere months of reporting that they feel a certain way. I think we need to take, at the very minimum, a far more cautious approach, look into other data, look into other options. And if you actually care about people, you will want to do this. You will even want to look into therapy that suggests maybe you aren't transgender in the first place. Maybe you don't have gender dysphoria at all. Let's try to make you congruent with your own body. If you love people, you don't want them to kill themselves, you want them to potentially have the best options possible, then we should try all options available and not just to throw away one as bigoted, which I'm not saying you guys are, but some people do.
Well, we do have data published in JAMA on like alternative ways of treating dysphoria, like psychotherapy, and it just happens to not be as effective as transitioning. So yeah, I mean, I don't think
psychotherapy.
I'd have to look into that, but would you not say that should be where you start?
Well, I don't think me and Avi are saying that we should transition people who were not confident in like whose dysphoria we're not confident in, or that we shouldn't look into alternatives. It just happens to be the case that based on the current empirical evidence that we have, none of the alternatives seem to be nearly as effective as transitioning.
Yeah. And none of them have been shown to reduce the rate of suicide except for transition.
Right. So
look into that.
Which it doesn't reduce by much. It really doesn't. Still
over 50%, by the way.
I'm sorry?
Over 50% reduction in the odds ratio, actually.
Yep. I have to see that study because I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's still, but 50% of them still end up attempting suicide.
No.
Of that demographic.
Yeah, you can go from
they transition and then 50%.
Wait, not 50%. No. It's an odds ratio. So you'll end up going from, so for example, if you go from 10% commit suicide to 5%, that's a 50% reduction, right? It doesn't mean 50% of people commit suicide. So in the JAMA cohort, for example, if you look at the amount of people that ended up, that in the JAMA study, if you look at the amount of people who committed suicide attempt, it went from like 10 to 5, like 9.8 to 4 point something or something like that. So it wasn't 50%.
No, 40%
it just was
of
a
them.
50% reduction.
That's a statistic. That is a across the board statistic that 40% of them, even after transition, have attempted suicide at some time in their life. That doesn't. I mean, are you saying that it makes there's a percentage difference between like after?
The issue is that I think the number you're citing isn't that 40% of trans people attempted suicide after transitioning. The study is that even 40% of trans people who have transitioned have also committed suicide. But I think that I'm pretty sure that the paper you're referencing didn't actually disaggregate whether or not those suicides occurred or suicide attempts occurred before or after the individuals in question transitioned.
Yeah. Their life, the difference, important to differentiate lifetime. Yeah.
Okay.
Lifetime suicide, you'll see. Yeah, so typically what's done is you either do you could do prior year suicidal attempt rates, and you could have it have it temporally analyzed such that it's 2 years at least after the transition, or you could do 1 year after the transition. And when you do that, you see that the suicide rates they do drop, and they do drop compared to what would have happened otherwise, and they drop by a dramatic degree, by over 50%.
Do you have the statistic of how many people end up detransitioning back, like regretting their decision and walking it back?
I've heard, I don't have it offhand, but I've heard around 3%. Around 3%.
Oh, I think it's more than that. However, I think
that's what I've seen.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe 3%. I'd have to look into that. I think it's more because we also have to consider the people that regret their decision. And they walk it back. So we have to take that into consideration, that it is not a solution. You know, transitioning, permanently mutilating your body is not going to make you feel better. It is not going to help. You are still going to struggle with those same thoughts, the same torment that's in your brain every single day. That's still going to be there. You can change the outside, but you got to restore yourself from the inside out. It might slightly decrease suicide rates, but for how long? You know, we also have to consider the detransitioning demographic of that too, who made a mistake, regret it, and turned back. That's included in that as well. Yeah. So I don't know.
If it is 3%, even if you included that, it would make
I think it's pretty close from what I've read. The studies in the UK that I read, it's about the same, maybe 1 or 2%. But it's about the same. The suicide rate remains pretty consistent. In fact, enabling it we may see it makes it worse in the end.
So it's not the same at all. The issue with that data is that they either compare it to the general population or they compare it to transgender individuals who don't even desire surgery in the first place. When you actually have a proper control group, you see a over 50% reduction in those who have all desired surgeries compared to those who do not have the desired surgeries.
Okay.
We had a super chat from Ryan B saying, "We love Lauren Witzke. Let's fucking go at PT. Great job getting him on here."
I love you guys too.
From Cheesehead, "Is sincerely believing you are a wolf or tiger a mental illness? What if it doesn't cause distress?"
So one thing that you can add into it is a false.
He's cutting out for you guys.
For example, one of the criteria for schizophrenia are delusions, right? So yes, if what they mean by saying that they're a tiger, if they actually have a persistent belief that they are a feline with certain stripes, then they would they could be diagnosed with delusional disorder. However, if someone is saying that they are the opposite gender and they don't actually mean that they're the opposite sex, they don't mean they have chromosomes they don't have a false belief, then no, then I wouldn't consider that a mental disorder.
Right.
Really,
I guess it's just sort of like, I guess like if we were going to analogize it, like somebody saying that they're sincerely like biologically a tiger might be analogous to somebody sincerely believing that they like biologically have like different chromosomes than the chromosomes that they actually have. And that would be a false or a delusional belief. But I think the idea is just that this belief that you have different chromosomes isn't entailed by being trans, right? And so if we were going to make the tiger case analogous to like what is actually entailed by being trans, it would be something more like somebody says they're a tiger, but what they mean by that is that they enjoy wearing like orange sweatshirts or something like that and like running in the grass. And if that's all they mean by I think I'm a tiger, then that's not going to be a delusional belief. Yeah.
Okay. From Cute Root, the delusion that they were born the wrong gender is the mental illness itself, regardless of the resulting dysphoria. Also, Avi clearly has autism. Okay. So,
well, sometimes look, I'll take that as a compliment. That's fine. But
yeah,
but
we
look,
love our weaponized autism.
You want to say,
true.
Yeah,
That's
like,
what political debate is. It's
I'll add
literally
it.
Competitive autism.
Yeah,
that's what all of this is.
I'll add it to maybe I'll add it to my Twitter bio. That autism. I'll use that. I finally have but it would be self-diagnosis, so I won't do that.
But you have to say neurodivergent. It'll be more potent.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. I gotta do that. Ooh. Anyway, So look, if you want to say that the false claim, the delusional belief is that they're the gender they're not, then you need to spell out what claim is or belief is entailed that's false, right? Because if everything they're saying based on what they mean is just true beliefs, and they haven't claimed anything false. So then when we say delusions, we typically think of things that have false beliefs. That's actually entailed on many definitions, or at least the most standardly used definitions of delusions, that they have persistent false beliefs in the absence of, even in the face of evidence. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Guys, I got to run here. I hate to be that horrible person with a real life, but I want to go hang out with my child instead of weirdos on the internet.
Thank you so much
Love
for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No,
thanks. Fun. Thanks for having me, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, and wait, so did you say you had to go too, or are you okay?
Yeah, I'm gonna roll out of here in about 6 minutes. If you have another question.
All right, let me see if we have anything for you. A lot of these are for them, so they can stick around. One question was for Supreme Gentleman Hacker to the Laurens. The DSM-5 estimates that 656,000 people suffer from gender dysmorphia. And the Williams Institute says that 19,680,000 people identify as trans. Is this correlative? I don't know why this is like a stupid question.
Yeah, probably because they go hand in hand. I'd have to look at the study though, because she just kind of. But yeah, usually they do go hand in hand. You know, Avi made some good points about, transgenderism and gender dysmorphia having, a lot of likeness, but gender dysmorphia has one extra component to it. I still believe that categorizes transgenderism as a mental illness in itself, just because it hasn't been clinically documented. But they are affiliated together with each other. On this note, if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to close out and say goodbye and thank everybody, if that's okay. Okay. Justin and Brittany, thank you so much for hosting this debate. Avi and Mouthy Infidel, what was your real name, Justin?
My name is Ethan.
Ethan, it was nice to meet you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come on here. If you'd like to continue following me, you can follow me on Telegram and Gab. I've been banned from Twitter. But, also we do have a lot of discussions about people, my heart is for broken people that struggle with things. I want people to get free from their addictions, their hang-ups, any kind of character flaws that you want to work through. I am somebody who would love to talk to you and help you through it. We're all in this together. And I think that encouraging each other is really important during this time. So please follow me on my pages. Please reach out to me if you need anything. God bless you all. Thank you so much for having me, and you all take care, okay?
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks.
All right.
All right. Take care.
All right. And so, Unleash, thank you for the super chat. Said, thanks, Politically Devout fam. Britt and Todd, thanks for hosting, and the panel. Thanks, Lauren, ×2 for coming on. All right, so we have some other ones here. From Jack the Hat, gender is a social construct, Abby. Why would they need hormone treatment unless gender is the same as biological sex?
I just don't see why they, even if it's not the same as biological sex, I don't see how gender can't play a role in people being distressed. It should really be that simple. Why does something have to be biological sex in order to cause someone to be distressed to the point that they need medical attention?
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't see why that would need to be the case.
Okay, so from Complex to Avi and Infidel, if I see myself in the mirror as the Hulk, a big green monster, but I'm actually a 5'2" skinny white male, is that not related to my mental health?
So again, as you can answer.
It's a lot of these.
I'm thinking. Did you want? I mean, we answered it already. We can move on,
I mean, the idea is just going to be that, if you literally believe you're the Hulk, as in, you literally are the Marvel character, that's a false belief. It might be reflective of, some delusional disorder or something like that. Similarly, if you delusionally believe that you have, XX chromosomes, even though you have XY chromosomes, that might be a delusional belief. But the point is just that belief, a belief about you having biological characteristics that in reality you don't have, no such belief is entailed by being trans. All being trans entails is that you have a gender that doesn't coincide with your sex.
Okay. All right, so this one is from Glory. Says, a lot of transgenders stop identifying as trans, but some have already gotten the surgery early on. I think guys might have addressed it, but and they regret it. How do you help these people realize they aren't trans? That probably would have been addressed again.
Yeah. So for people who, for people, so look, there have been some individuals who have detransitioned. There are certain things that are relatively permanent, and there are certain things that are not. Some avenues of things, so for example, deepening of the voice, that is permanent, it doesn't go away. There are some surgeries that can correct that. There are surgeries that can deepen the voice or make the voice higher pitch. So that would be one option. There are certain surgeries that can transition back in some ways, but not always. Some aspects of transition surgeries or therapy are going to be permanent. But you do what you can to help the people transition back in the best way that you can.
Yeah. I mean, it's also just going to be people appeal to like the detransitioning stuff a lot. I mean, the first thing is just that, I mean, we have to do cost benefit analysis, right? Like, I mean, are there going to be some people who transition and then they decide they didn't want to transition? And then this causes them some level of distress. Sure, there's going to be some small number of people of whom that is true. But the number of people who would be suffering some significant amount of psychological distress if they hadn't transitioned, even though they desire to, is just going to be much more considerable.
From Sussy Baka to Avi. From G Sneed to Avi. What is the percentage of the population that is trans but has not and does not have gender dysphoria?
Dysphoria. Yeah. So I don't know the exact percentage. I'll just point out that the percentage is tangential to this debate proposition, but I actually suspect it's not very low. And the reason I suspect it's not very low is because a lot of transgender people have been alleviated of their dysphoria. They've been cured of it. Their dysphoria has been removed because they've gotten therapies to cure themselves of this incongruency between their mind and their body. So actually, I don't know the exact percentage, but I don't think it's minuscule.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so from Sussy Baka to Avi, you use propositional logic to say it's not an illness, but isn't set theory a better model? That is, people are a subset of that set containing a mentally ill people.
I'm not sure how that people are a subset of a set containing a mentally ill. Well, again, so that's not my argument. If you want to bring a set theory argument, we can have that discussion. I don't. If you're asking me why I'm using propositional logic in theory, I don't know why I would use set theory when I can get everything I need to get done in propositional logic. I'm just not sure what the question is asking, really.
Yeah, I don't really understand.
Jada Lee says, "How can someone with gender dysphoria be transgender?"
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. There's a lot of troll questions for their super chats. Dragon something another. I think it was like Dragon Fire and Ice. Why does Avi hate real women?
What?
Would you like to address that, Avi?
I guess it's just because, so I was at my Elders of Zion meeting yesterday, and what we want to do, we just want to convert all the real women into men, all the men into women, and that's what we want. We just want to, change all their genitals, like it's part of the whole thing. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay.
It's something related to control or something.
From Ryan says, Avi needs to quit eating impossible meat. All that soy is making him lactate. Okay. Got a lot of fans.
That's part of me hating. That's just part of me hating the real woman.
Yeah, of course. Another from Ryan B. Is Avi really saying that transgenderism is not a mental illness? Gender dysphoria is, and only 98% of transgenders have that. Can he clarify that?
Well, again, I don't think 98% of transgender people have gender dysphoria because, as I said, I think a lot of people have been alleviated and their gender dysphoria has been removed because of certain therapies. So yes, I am saying that transgenderism is not a mental illness. Gender dysphoria is a mental illness. And A, not all transgender people have gender dysphoria. And B, even the ones who do can be cured of it. And they end up not having gender dysphoria while still being transgender.
Okay. This is another one of the same types of questions, but I'll just read it. Cheese says, if I feel like a baby and wearing only a diaper everywhere cures my baby dysphoria, do I no longer have a mental illness? All right, we did that type of thing. I don't know.
It's the same theme over and over again.
Yeah, it's the same different question, just rephrased in different ways.
Can I ask Avi something really quick since he's a doctor?
Yeah, sure.
So I read something, it was a study, it said something along the lines of you can be multiple genders in different systems of your body. So just because you're reproductive system is male, you could be female in a different system in your body. Is that true? And can you explain like the logic behind that a little bit?
So this is not so much related to gender as it is to sex.
Or sex,
but yeah,
okay.
so there's different definitions of sex. So you can operate with like a secondary sex characteristic definition, or you can operate with a chromosomal definition, or you can operate with a gametic entailed definition. So for example, you can have someone who has XY chromosomes. However, they can actually, there was a case report where they actually were able to produce egg cells. They actually had an ovary and can produce egg cells. So depending on how you define sex, one system of defining sex, they would be female, and in another system, they would be male on a chromosomal definition. And in some systems, they would be both. So that's a whole complicated topic. But yes, it depends on how you define sex. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so let me see if there's anything else. This one, I guess, was to the Lawrence, but it says from Jello, the redneck right-wing femoids doesn't know what she's saying. All the trans people I know are fine, and I even being financed by the great trans entrepreneur Samantha Hyde to teach kids how to program. Okay.
What?
I don't know. Don't ask me.
Cool story.
I feel like people
I
are
think
just typing like random clusters of words.
yeah, that happens quite often in our chats. They get a little excited. So yeah, I guess that's kind of all for the super chats and stuff. Other than somebody was telling me, okay, I'll just read the last one. It was saying, from I think it's from AI. The title says debate panel in all caps. Why are you now telling Avi that this is a discussion panel? If you're upset at him winning too hard, you should have gotten better opponents. Pathetic.
I gotta say, Brittany, this person has a point.
No, we talked about this. We had to praise somebody because it was this motherfucker throwing me under the bus, acting like you don't know.
You can't have it. You can't have it both ways, Brittany. You can't market it as a debate. Both strategies to get it a discussion.
One-on-one from now on.
Well, Brittany, why are you mad about Avi winning too hard? I'm curious about that.
The problem is, here's the problem. The issue is Brittany has recently gotten exposed as being one of us, and by one of us being part of the Jewish cabal.
About that.
Shit.
And because she wants to distance herself from being on my side because she's still trying to cope and keep cover and keep cover from it being exposed how Jewish she is.
I don't have to hide her anymore. I'm just glad.
But yeah. So I'm just gonna change the title to fucking Avi Show. Holy hell. This was Avi's freaking show tonight. But wait, what is this from Jake? Avi, hop on the P provoked voice chat after. Who is this? Jake Lesba? I don't know who that is. Yeah, I think that's about all. I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts you wanted to get out there.
I'll see you at the next Elders of Zion meeting, Brittany.
I'm not going with you anymore.
I'm sure you'll see each other at CPAC sometime or something.
There you go.
Probably. That's where it's happening. Yeah, so Avi, you got anything left?
No, that's it.
Did you get it all out of your system tonight? Did you get it all out?
Thanks. Yeah, I did it. We did it, Brittany. Thanks for having me. Thanks for hosting. And yeah, always a pleasure.
Of course it is. Mouthy, you got anything?
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks guys for coming on, and to the Lawrence that came on as well. If you guys have not already followed, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. We have debates like nearly every day. We do pop-on panels every Saturday night at like 10 p.m. Eastern. So those we don't have scheduled topics. We just kind of allow people to pop on and rotate throughout the night. So those are fun. Other than that, I guess we are back. When the hell are we back? I think we're back Tuesday night. So yeah, we'll be back Tuesday unless we get a debate tomorrow, but I don't think we will. All right, so yeah, I guess that's all. We will close this shit down then.
All right, peace out.
Good night.
Peace.
Good night.
Oh wait, I gotta rate somebody.